Hello and welcome to implementing SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and Google G Suites. My name is Shahzad Mirza, and I am the Director of Operations for Global Cyber Alliance. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to basically go through each of the Google G Suite settings to help you and assist you to see where each of these items can be implemented and where each of them need to be installed or created in your DNS system. So obviously we're going to be using Google G Suites for our mail system. The domain we're going to be using is .dmarc.org, and we're going to be using GoDaddy as our DNS provider. So the steps are obviously in Google are going to be the same for everybody, but the steps in DNS and GoDaddy might be slightly different, but it will at least give you the idea of what you need to do in terms of implementing each one of these standards in your DNS system. So let's first go over to our Google Chrome, and here is basically our mail system, the web-based mail for .dmarc.org. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the steps in terms of implementing SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So for SPF first, so Sender Policy Framework. Now, the nice thing about when you set up your account in Google G Suites is that there will be a section where it's going to tell you that, hey, do you want to, that they need to confirm that you own the domain that you're going to be registering or you're going to be using within Google G Suites. So in order to do that, it will need to connect to your DNS system. So in this case, it was GoDaddy.com. It's going to have you authenticate, and then when it has you authenticate, it'll actually ask you to create records for you. And the records it's going to create for you are going to be your mail server records, but on top of that, it's also going to create for you a SPF record as well. So it does that all for you right off the bat. Now the thing is though, if you already had created an SPF record, you need to make sure you merge the two SPF records together. So how do we check for the SPF? So since we're using GoDaddy, I've already logged into my account. So here's the domain .dmarc.org. We're just going to go to DNS, and then under DNS, as this loads, we're going to have our various types of DNS records that are available to us, or that have already been pre-created for us. So we have an A record, we have CNAME records, here are the mailbox records, the MX records for google.com, they're automatically created, and it also creates two TXT records, which is the Google site verification, and then here is the SPF record. So V equals SPF1 include : SPF.google.com-all. So in this case here, we're just basically saying that all of Google's email servers are allowed to send mail on behalf of .dmarc.org. Now, if we do have additional ones that we need to add, you just click on the pencil and then add the additional domains that you might be using. So whether it be Salesforce, MailChimp, or other third-party tools you may be using, or if there are other systems that you're using, just add them to this rule here. Do not create a second SPF record. You should only have one. So now we've confirmed that our SPF record is in place. So the next step is to implement DKIM. So now in order to do DKIM, what we need to be is in the admin console. So only the administrator of this domain is able to do so. So one way of getting to the admin console is to click on these dots here, scroll down, and just click on the admin application. So I already did that, and I have a tab here for the admin console. So now where do we go here? So since DKIM, SPF, and DMARC apply to the email domain, we need to go to the Gmail settings. So we're going to go under Apps, and then under Apps, we're going to go to G Suite. So this is where Gmail is, so the mail configuration. From here, we go to Gmail, and then under Gmail, we're going to have various settings, but what we need to do is set up authenticated email. That's what DKIM is going to do. So it's right here, authenticate email, set up email authentication, DKIM. You click on that. This is where you can select which domains you want to create DKIM for. So if you have multiple domains, you can choose the domain from here. So right now, obviously, it's not authenticated email, but we need to create a record for us to be able to use and implement to our system. So like it says here, it may take up to 48 hours and DNS changes to fully propagate. So that really depends on who your DNS provider is. It actually could take anywhere between 24 to 48 hours, but sometimes the change could be immediate as well. So we're going to create a new record. So the nice thing about G Suites is that Google will actually handle your private key for you. When we're generating a new record, it's going to create the public key for us. So we don't have to manage a private key. We just have to make sure the public key is published correctly in DNS. So we click on Generate New Report. And so here you have two different levels. You can select either 1024 or 2048. Obviously, the larger the bit length, the more secure it's going to be. So we'll go with 2048. Just be wary though that not all DNS providers allow for 2048 bit length. Some of them will only go with a 1024. They should be able to implement 2048, but they have to do some extra steps in order to be able to do so, which is basically to break the record a little bit. Now the prefix selector, which they're saying is optional, and it is optional. You can stick with Google as your prefix selector if you choose to. So the selector is going to be the name of the record you're going to be creating. So it's part of the name. So you can deal with Google, which is the default, or you can create your own. So in this case, we'll just call it DM1. So it's something we're putting in. Selector can be any name you want. Just make sure it's something that you do know and that's something that does make sense to you. So we'll click on generate. And once we click on generate, at this point now we have our information that we need in order to put into DNS. We have our DNS host name, so the TXT record name, which is dm._domain key, and then our TXT record value, which is basically DKIM1 using RSA, and then here from P equals, this is our entire public key. So what do we do next? What we need to do now is take this information and put it into our DNS. So we're going to go over back to our domain manager. So again, we're back in GoDaddy, and we're going to create a record. And just like it said, we need to create a TXT record. So at this point, we're just going to click on add, and then set up our record. So the type we want is TXT, just like it says. Next, we want our host. So the nice thing is this is breaking it apart for you, so that way you just need to copy the information that you were going to use. So we have a DNS host name. We're going to highlight this, copy it, go back to domain manager, and then paste this into the host section. The next is the TXT value, and that's all the information here, TXT record value. So we're going to copy everything from V all the way down to the B. So this entire section. We're going to copy this again, go back to domain manager, and then under TXT value, we're going to go ahead and paste it. So now you can change the TTL, the time to live, as you choose, but we're going to keep it to 1 hour. We'll just stick with the defaults in this case. Click on save, and now at this point we have a DKIM key. So now again, just make note that this could take 24 to 48 hours to propagate across all the DNS systems. So this may take a little bit more time than in order for it to actually implement. So as soon as you send mail, it does not mean that your domain key or your DKIM key is going to be implemented immediately. So while we're going through this process here, let's go ahead and now implement DMARC. So now in order to do DMARC, there's nothing in Google, before we go into DMARC, we need to make sure we click on Start Authentication here. It's going to check to see whether it was verified or not. In this case, it was not verified. So like I said, it could take 24 to 48 hours in order for it to update. So let's go ahead and let this sit. We'll keep it right here. And then we'll just move on to DMARC and come back to this after we implement DMARC to see if it goes into place. So now in order to implement DMARC, there's no configuration or setting that you're going to be setting up in G Suites or anything in that case. So what we'll do is let's go to the Global Cyber Alliance DMARC guide. So dmarc.globalcyberalliance.org. And from here is where we can go ahead and start the DMARC setup. So this will kind of help you guide you through the process of what to do in order to implement or create DMARC. So the key thing is with this guide, is it does help you with SPF, it does help you out with DKIM, but I showed you the Google way of doing it because that's the way you actually want to do it. You don't necessarily need to follow the setup guide. You can if you choose to, but you need to still take the information from from Google G Suites in order and put it into here. So again, our domain that we're using is gotdmarc.org. I'm going to click submit. It's going to check. You'll see that SPF exists. Granted, it says that DKIM does not. That's mainly because of the fact that it probably hasn't propagated, and two, our DKIM selector doesn't, or scanner needs to have additional information. Since I used something that's not the typical one like Google, I use DM1 as the selector name. I'm going to have to actually put this in here and see if it'll work. So I can put in DM1, click submit, it checks, and there it goes. So it actually found the key, so that means the record is in place. But now we still have to implement DMARC. So I click on DMARC here and then press next. And this will start up the DMARC setup guide. So this will first explain what DMARC is and what it is all about, but we'll go past this step here. So next, so in this case, we're now going to go and answer a series of questions in order to create our DMARC policy. So the first thing is what should the policy level for DMARC be? So we have three options: none, quarantine, and reject. So in this case, I know for a fact that .dmarc.org does not have any subdomains, and since this is a brand new domain, right now we do not have any third-party tools or third-party systems that are sending mail on our behalf. So I'm just going to jump right to reject. Just so be careful though. If you're not sure of if whether or not you have third-party tools that are sending mail on your behalf, then start off with none, and then from there move up to see what happens and if you have any other tools, and review those reports that you get. So it is recommended to always start off with none. I'm going to reject because, again, .dmarc.org is a brand new one, registered domain, so we want to keep it safe. Press next. And now this is where you want to send the aggregate reports to. So what's the location you want to send this to? So for now, I'm going to be sending this to the generic email, .dmarc.org. So typically I recommend don't send it to a generic, to your personal account. Send it to a generic account. Something like dmarc.-rua would be better. But in this case, that doesn't exist, so I'm just going to send it to my own account at .dmarc.org. So now the aggregate report is the one that you want to get because this is the one that will give you all the information that you need. So this will include the domains that are involved, the IPs, sending IP addresses that are involved, and how DKIM and SPF were handled. Did they pass? Did they fail? Were they aligned in any way? And this way you can see what's failed, what's unaligned, and what changes you need to make to either SPF or DKIM. So I press next. I'm going to send the forensic report. So again, the forensic report is going to be a little bit more detailed information about the messages. You're not necessarily going to get forensic reports from everyone. In some cases, they're not going to send reports, mainly just for privacy concerns. We'll press next. Now, in this case, what's the DMARC policy for subdomains? So in this case, it can be really up to you what you want to set up here, but it's really be careful when you're using this. Because the P tag, which we initially did first, which we already set to reject, we're basically saying at that point that all top-level domains and sub-level domains are going to be protected by DMARC. So it doesn't matter. Here, though, if I choose to go with none or quarantine, I'm basically saying that if we have subdomains, do not follow what the P tag does, do what this tag does. So if I had subdomains, I would leave it at none and then set a policy for each subdomain. But in this case, I know I don't have subdomains. I'm going to go to reject, even though it's not required to put that in there. We could actually leave the tag out. But in the guide, it will actually provide you with the tag. So now these are optional settings that you can adjust as you need to. They're not necessary. If you do not select them, they will automatically be applied, even though the tag doesn't appear for each one of them. So in this case, I'm going to leave them all pretty much the same except for this one. And when the error report should be generated, I'm just going to say basically choose one because I want the reports to be generated no matter what, if any of the checks fail or if anything happens. I'm going to leave everything else pretty much the same. I'm going to leave the reporting interval levels the same and so on. I click finish, and now I have my DMARC TXT records.